Sounds like we're both back in a training group.
I mean, I know I am. You say you are. We are back in the group for this week. It's April 26th, 2021. Welcome aboard. This is the Crushing Iron Podcast, and we are episode 472. Said it with confidence, so it was smooth, silky. The question is, am I correct?
It rocks solid.
Yeah, rock solid and correct. It is an absolutely stunning day here in Chattanooga, Tennessee. I hope you're having an awesome start to your week. Hope you had a great weekend. If it's your first time tuning in, welcome. I know you have a lot of options in the podcast universe and triathlon podcasts in general, but now that racing is back full-time, rolling on strong,
we're the only choice.
We are. We're the only choice for 1 hour of your week here and there. But we come to you twice a week, traditionally Mondays and Thursdays, but always twice a week. We always have for what's going on. Getting close now to 5 years. We cover triathlon, we cover life, we cover everything in between. Sometimes we'll do in-depth podcasts on swim, bike, and run training. We'll do race recaps, race previews, occasional guests. But for the most part, Mike and I, as both athletes ourselves, coaches, best friends, we just sit back and chat. We've been doing this for a long time. We are not professionals. We are not experts. We're just like you. We're just trying to figure this thing out. I've been doing it for a long time. We're wise in our old. We try to be wise. We are definitely experienced in 20 plus years for both of us collectively. I've been doing this for long. I don't even know how long. It's too long. Like I was texting back and forth somebody who's doing Gulf Coast in 3 weeks, and I think it's 3 weeks from today. And I was like, yeah, that was like the first 70.3 I ever did. And it was a long time back before, like, I don't think you can find the results anymore on the interwebs, but it's been a while.
Someone has them in a filing cabinet.
Yeah, I'm sure they do. Yeah, so like I can fax it to you. You just like fax it to me. But yeah, we've been doing this for a long time. And so that's what we try to just kind of sit back and have an open, honest discussion about what we're going through personally, what our athletes are going through. Sometimes we'll hop into our Facebook group, which is Crushing Iron Group. If you want to search that on Facebook, we'll let you in after you answer one simple question. And a lot of awesome people in there, especially here as races are kicking off pretty much every weekend now, and will be for the remainder of the year. A lot of awesome people in there. You got everybody from people who haven't participated in a single triathlon ever, who are just kind of lurking around, trying to get their feet wet. And you got people in between that have been doing this for a long time. People have been doing it for just a year. You got Ironman champions. You got people on pretty much every end of the spectrum, which provides a lot of insight and opportunity for knowledge, it's a great, awesome community, a lot of awesome people in there. That's it. We have no sponsors. We have no ads. We have one agenda. That's to keep you happy and healthy in your endurance sports journey.
Yeah, and keep each other happy and healthy.
Can I say something real quick?
Sure.
I'm so freaking glad racing is back. Like I was
like, you're going to comment on my outfit.
No, listen, like I'm not going to comment. You look svelte today. You look like lean and mean. Like you got a little bit of the 5 o'clock shadow going on the beard, or that's not a beard. It's just like it's unshaven, unkept, but it looks solid on you, man. You got your strong pair of Hokas on today, not your softies.
It's kind of a transition. I don't want to go totally old man to young man overnight. So I'm just sort of like working my way down to the shoes.
I see what you're doing. What I feel like you're doing is people look at you and they're usually like absolutely flabbergasted at your actual age because you look a lot younger than you really are. And how old are you? What, you're 57?
At 56 or
56. 56. Yes, you're in their mid. Can we say mid 50s? Okay, we're in your mid 50s. People are shocked to think in your 50s they see you're because you look like you're in your 40s, and so you dress that way, and then you're like, because you want people to know that you're actually older, but you look a lot younger. So you dress basically from head to ankle like, nice, fit, lean looking, 40-year-old, and they probably look at you and think, he's probably 46, 45, and they don't fully appreciate you until they get to the shoes. And then they look at the Hokas and they think, oh man, he's probably in his mid to late 50s. Like this guy's really got it going on. So it really works, I think, to your advantage for people to fully appreciate. Exactly. Like, people, I do the same thing with the way that I dress, right? I never dress up. I'm always like way dressing down, to many people's chagrin, I think. But then when I put on like a pair of jeans and like a button up, people are like, oh, you look really nice. Like, what do you have, a special occasion? I'm like, see, it plays to my strength, which is, lower expectations. And then, you just kind of, deliver once or twice a year and people really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, it does work. Cause man, I see, I'm like, wow, that's straight off. We talked about it before. Do you Abercrombie or do you go to like Chess King still?
Who?
Chess King.
I don't even know what that is.
That's an old mall store that was just
Chess
solid.
King? Oh, that sounds like an after-school thing.
For
Joseph. I know Joseph A.
Casual
Banks. Yeah. I'm not sure. I don't think I have a.
It was a little bit more like it was a little disco-y.
That's not me.
I know.
You know what I mean? You're my best friend. You know that I'm the farthest thing from disco-y. I don't even know how to tie a tie. Okay, like you'll never see me in a tie. You'll never see me. There's 3 things. You'll never see me in a tie. You'll never see me in a turtleneck. Like those are just forbidden. And you'll never see me in a sweater vest. Like those are 3 or pleated khakis. There's a lot like loafers. None. You'll never see me in it ever. Like without question. If you do see me in one, then you need to have an intervention and be like, things have gone off the rails. You're obviously heading in a darker direction. Like, can we get this thing back on board?
Yeah, I can see you like reading to a kindergarten class. Sweater vest. People are like, what is this kind of podcast?
Who needs Mr. Rogers when you got Mr. Robbie? Yeah. But no, the pump racing's back. It's I mentioned that in our weekly check-in email to the athletes this morning, that it's just like, after like going like the last 14 to 15 months of having to fill in like a weekly email for our athletes that we started doing during the last year because everything that was going on, and now to be able to fill it with like things that are actually happening, not, hope and optimism and positivity and things are coming and, things are going to be rolling down. It's like they're rolling. Like again, like this weekend, big weekend. You got a 70.3 in Australia that we have an athlete doing. Then you got St. George 70.3, which is also going to be, has a huge, not I would say huge, but a very, very competitive pro field. It's going to be the first race year that Ironman Live is on, where they'll actually broadcast parts of the race. And then we have a lot of athletes participating in it. I think it's the North American 70.3 championships. They get a lot of world championship slots there. Beautiful location, very hard course, and I think is going to deliver some pretty gnarly weather for the people that are going to participate there, which is it's kind of where I wanted to go with the topic today. Considering like early last week we had lows in the 30s, and then coming here late this week, I think we're gonna have highs in like the mid to upper 80s. And it's kind of that time of year where you're getting ready for races and you have this specific level of fitness, and you go to a race venue where it's like it's just, especially here in the South, like they have a saying, it's like, if you don't like the weather, stick around, because
that's a saying everywhere.
Yeah, well, I mean, it can be a saying for us too, okay? But you look at like St. George this week, and the forecast right now for Saturday is windy and 94. Okay, 94.
So not snow then.
Not so, but it could be, right? Because like that's the course that's also been like so cold that athletes really struggle because it's just like in the 40s in the morning and the water temperature is super cold. Like, and that's just it's an interesting part of the year as a coach and as an athlete. And I think it's important to think through, depending on where you live and how you're looking at races, that like what the fitness that you have now, if you're only looking at what pace is being delivered or what miles per hour is being delivered, and then here in the next month, what you're also going to have doing, like it was fascinating because we have a bunch of athletes in Texas, and they were all commenting this last weekend. This weekend would have been Ironman Texas weekend. And I think some rain came in, and then it's been in like the 90s and super humid. It would have been an absolute bloodbath, right? Because this time of year is kind of like the weather for the majority of the country is so, like there was snow this week. We had athletes that got snow this week, and then it's going to be the 80s this week. The weather this time of year is so blatantly inconsistent that you don't have time to adapt to it, like to actually get, because like obviously if you're a guy that runs 8-minute miles like you have been for the last 3 to 4 months in the winter and the early spring when the temperatures are favorable, 30s, 40s, 50s, even kind of like mid to high 60s, and then once the humidity goes up and the temps go up and you have like an 80-degree day, you're like, oh, this is gonna suck, right? And it's just kind of one of these, an interesting period of time, I think, when like May 1st all the way to kind of like mid-June, till we can finally get some good consistent weather to where your body has time to adapt. You kind of have to just put your ego aside, put some of your training pace expectations aside, and just roll with it. And the same goes for, again, St. George 70.3, where most of these athletes, I would say 95% of them haven't been training in 95-degree heat. So it's going to be a totally different show. The same goes for Gulf Coast 70.3 coming up. It could be a super hot and humid day in Panama City, which again, you might have a week to get used to it, but that's not enough time, right? So you have to adjust things. Chattanooga is statistically a difficult race because of where it falls in the calendar. We have, the 70.3 here in May, then you have the full in September, which comes in on like the bookends of seasons, like the beginning of summer, where we usually have like man, it is cool and perfect temps like the Monday, Tuesday for race week, and then like Friday, Saturday, Sunday come, and it's like an absolute furnace. Same thing goes for the full. The last year they had the full on the Monday or Tuesday of the week. I remember sitting outside on my deck in a hoodie and a sweatshirt, or a hoodie and some sweatpants, and I was like, man, it is going to be a perfect race day. And then slowly the forecast changes, like back to the summer. It's like 94 degrees, which is like the hottest day. And so it's one of those, I think it's a great time here to discuss, like, how do you approach racing and a course that is difficult, but also from a temperature standpoint, a condition standpoint, something that you haven't been able to practice. So you have to make a very smart and actionable plan on race day to where you can have your best race, but it might not be a direct reflection of the fitness that you've been seeing because you've only been doing your stuff in either inside or, like I went and ran this morning, it was like in the mid 40s. It was like perfect running weather. But if later this week, if I go out and run midday, it's going to be a totally different story, right? And I just think it's an important conversation, especially because athletes, as much as they like to obsess and talk about and love their data, they tend to not look at the obvious, which is the weather and the humidity and the dew point and the factors that plays on your overall performance.
Yeah, because on the opposite side of the scale, we had some races this weekend that I had some athletes do, and it was pouring rain
and cold,
freezing cold. Water temperature was way down, and when you get out on that, like I was telling him, it's like you want to hit that bike, but if it's raining, obviously that's going to affect the way you ride. And then usually that weather is perfect for running. So if you can get to that point, then you can really kind of throw down. And we had some guys doing that this weekend. But that's such a different animal. I think those are all good things, though. Like I still talk about my freezing cold race and how that was probably one of the best things that could have happened to me early in my career, because when you do these races and you experience it, nothing really can shock you then. Or at least it's kind of like you're used to it, or at least you've been through it, and it's not like a scare, because it can be scary. Like the 55 degree, water or something like that. I had another athlete that she first time swam in that cold. It was a practice swim, but she was really proud that she actually got in there, because it was like, something that scared her. And I think we all face that. Like some of these heat races can be that way, and certainly the cold weather, and if it does happen, like if you get to St. George and it starts snowing in the morning, that it turns 90, that'd be kind of interesting. But I think you're right, man. You got to kind of you got to play it smart. You got to just realize what's going on, because that was the one thing after we did Louisville that I wanted to race that hot race again so bad, because I sort of was like, okay, now I've been through it. I get it. I got to do it differently, and I just haven't had a chance. So I'm sort of hoping Chat's on a little bit on the hot side this year.
It's like, and that's the other thing. Like you mentioned that we had an athlete. I think we had athletes racing the same race, and had some athletes training for Ironman Tulsa. Like in the Midwest, it was like straight cold this weekend. Like he got out and started his ride, and it was like in the high 30s. Again, like once you from like 45 to like 65 is like your sweet spot for pretty much everything. Like biking, running, it's like that's ideal. And then as you start to go below 45 or above 65, then you start to see some kind of even if it's, very small, but you start to see a noticeable difference in how much effort you have to put out. Obviously, if you're biking, your RP is going to be higher. It's hard. It's even harder to bike. It's slower bike times the colder it is. That's just physics. And so it takes a lot more energy for your body to stay warm. And that's what I think people miss out on, some of the importance of like understanding that about their bodies, is that like, the lower you get, below kind of 40, 45, and the higher you get over 65, your body's no longer just kind of working out in like a controlled, like I can just kind of go and this is going to naturally happen. But then it's like, now your body has to work extra hard to stay warm, okay, and burn calories and burn energy to stay warm, or it has to work extra hard to cool itself, right? So you lose some of that effort, and things tend to start to feel harder. It's not just a, an apples to oranges comparison for or apples to apples comparison. And that's why, like, when you go into races, like when we talk to our athletes that are going to be doing St. George this weekend, it's like, that's when you get obsessed with, because a lot of athletes have had like the last year and a half, or even last 6 to 8 months to train, and like they see these pace and like this is gonna be my pace for race day. And you've been training in like perfect weather, like a lot of us have had for the last few months, and you hop into a place like St. George and it's like, excuse me, it's gonna be 90. Like your body, like you shouldn't expect to see the exact same performance that because your body is just not it's not used to participating in training and performing in that kind of temperature. But even if it was, you're still going to see some kind of a dip. Like you're just not going to have your best. It still might be a great performance, but in terms of like your fitness is always relative on how it plays against and with the conditions. How windy is it? What's the dew point? What's the humidity? What's the heat index? Like those are all things that start to chip away at your best pace. Like you could have a guy again go that's a regular 8-minute pace guy, and April, May, and then the heat of June, July, and August comes, and even as he adapts to it, it's not like he's going to start going from like 8s down to 7s. At that point, for a lot of athletes, it's about just like not losing a lot of speed, because you're now having to battle participating and running and riding and racing in like 90, 95 degree heat. You're not going to, I think it's a good thing to do for athletes is like, look out, check your favorite weather app. I'm a Wonderground guy, and like look at the dew point and the humidity before you go out on your run, so you can start to anticipate how it's going to either be positively affected or negatively affected. Like when I ran this morning, just pulled up because I was curious of the temperature, perfect temps, perfect sky, like no wind. Humidity was still like, I think 85 or 90. So it's fairly high, but the dew point was like 40. And here in like a month, it's going to be, humidity 90%, dew point 70, things that's basically like, they're like, have fun, like training outside. And so it goes back to, if you really want to do well within the race. And that's why like having expectations and having these like, these Tri-Calc times that, like your best case scenario is like, it rarely is ever best case scenario. Like it's not being Debbie Downer, it's just reality. But that's where folks get into trouble is they obsess about a miles per hour on the bike, that the course conditions might not be suitable for that day. It could be insanely windy, or very, very hot, or they're going to have a really hot run, or the same thing goes wrong. I'm used to seeing like 730s. So I'm going to come out of the gate pushing 730s and 93 degree heat that your body's not, prepared for. Have fun, right? Because then it's going to be a absolute disaster in the back half of the half marathon.
Mm. Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Tri-Calc, because that's the thing, right? That it's so, aside from the temperature, just the normal race itself, we always kind of go like, well, I could run that. I'm pretty sure I could run that on a perfect day or whatever. It takes so much mental strength to kind of add, if you're in Tri-Calc, to add a little bit of, fudge time for the idea that you just swam 2.5 miles and rode 112, and then you're like, maybe I can't really run that. But if you kind of like overestimate this, the speed, or like slow things down and kind of have that mentally in your head, and you're like, okay, I can actually probably do that, and then everything else is kind of gravy. But I just think that when you set, and I've done it, I've set myself up through Tri-Calc and really tried to go, well, yeah, but what's realistic, and it doesn't work. But then, because what happens is then you're raced, and you get in the race and you kind of start bumming out, and you're like, ah, man, and then it becomes a pain in the ass to even just race. But if you're realistically shooting high and then you're kind of coming in under it, man, I could see how that really could swing a race. You'd be like, man, I'm better than I thought or whatever. And then you can maybe let go a little bit. But if you're trying to always catch up and it's not happening, it makes for a really long marathon.
I think when you're going into a race where the conditions are going to be one way, they're going to be really, really cold, or they're going to be really, really hot, I think you no longer have to look at the event itself. It's more about, how am I going to manage and execute my day? Because races don't happen in a vacuum. That's why, even though, a lot of races happen on the same day of the year, on the same course, and they have, for 15, 20 years, statistically, you can still look back and think, all right, that was a slow day. That was a fast day. Like, look, Texas 70.3, like that was a slow day. They just had it got warm, but it was so windy. The swim was so hard. The times across the board were slower. Like if you look at the top end of the age groups on all of them, all the top times were slower compared to 2019. Like, so you still can't compare it, because every day is different. And so it's about managing and looking at it and think, all right, instead of saying, a 90-degree day in St. George, thinking, how am I ever going to, perform my best? It's about performing your best against what the day is giving you. And that's, I think, just a simple perspective that I think is also very hard for athletes in that, because you so want a time, right? You so want an overall time that you've been, really working for, but it's the athletes that are going to succeed. And this is the conversation I'll have with all our athletes they're doing the event, is like, throw your wish list pace in miles per hour out the window, because it now becomes taking your best fitness, and then now we're adding in the elements of the day, not to mention the course. Like at St. George is, I think, oftentimes confused with Snow Canyon and how difficult the bike course can be, which it can be. It's not an easy bike course, but in my opinion, the run course is absolute. It's a eater. Like it'll just eat your lunch. Like I think it's the hardest of the three of the day. And you're going to see people just absolutely obliterate themselves on the swim and the bike, and they're actually going to fry. And it's going to be, again, all people are going to be purging tens of 15 minutes. So you have to take that into consideration and think, especially if you're a person who is playing, how far up I want to end in my age group. Like, do I want to make the podium? Do I want to win my age group? How do I want to place against myself overall? Which again, even if you don't think or see yourself as a person who likes to participate or is going for the pointy end of the overall, you can still look, and see how you've done overall against the field, no matter whether it's 30th overall or whether it's 300th overall, or whether it's 1500th overall. Like, it still shows you where you move up against the field, regardless of what your time is. It's an important thing to look at. And so that's the conversation all the time. Like, if you're looking against it's a lot of athletes are going to ruin their day by only going off, how well they've done, on their indoor training or on their treadmills or in these really, perfected environments. And I'm like, this is the race where you want to put your money on the athletes who have, run on, dirt roads and gravel, and where they haven't been chasing pace, they're just putting the work in. They've been training at altitude, or it's been super cold, because even that's like, they know how to deal with elements. They know how they don't look for they're not going to succeed their best on the perfect day. They're going to succeed their best against the field, as far as a ratio goes, when there are elements that are challenging, that is like that added element of pressure, or the added element of temperature, or too cold or too many, like you've always said, you've always liked, when the conditions are a little bit harder, because you think it kind of gives you either an advantage or it levels the playing field a little bit to a person who may have a better level of fitness, because you feel like it doesn't affect you as much. Like, is that, and so I think that's something that a lot of people who go into this race who have been only training on a vision or an expectation of, I'm going sub this. I'm going sub this today. And then all of a sudden they wake up and now it's kind of like, I would have to imagine it's going to have put a dent in their motivation in terms of their excitement for the race, to think, okay, well, I have to kind of throw that out the window. And now I'm going to have to kind of go to my secondary goal, which is also may not be attainable from a time standpoint, depending on how hot it really gets. So now I just have to go to like executing my race and seeing how good the day is going to be. And I have to probably do that on different numbers than what I'm accustomed to, which again, can't be just on pace and power. Because again, if you're looking at a run that's going to be insanely hot, which it could be again for like all the upcoming races, you got Ironman Tulsa, you got, all a ton of races in the next 4 to 5 weeks that could all have very, very, very hot runs that people aren't going to be necessarily acclimated for because of just where we are with the change of seasons. You can't go off the pace. This is the pace I've been running for the last 2 to 3 months. Well, yeah, but it wasn't 95, right? Or wasn't, 8. So you can't just start that at mile 1 on the run. You have to start that at your first stroke of the swim and your first mile on the bike. There's things you have to work your whole way through. You can't just think about it on the run or the bike. The swim, you have to think about it from the beginning of the race.
Yeah. And I just think that that's so hard for people. And we talk about it nonstop about how this is sort of a race of attrition, and it's that tortoise hare thing, like just consistency and like not taking yourself out of the race in the swim or the bike and letting that run come around and things like that, and I talk about it all the time, but you get out there and you get caught in the moment, and I think it's so easy to do, but you see it all the time where people they're just going to plug along and run their race, and they just start picking people off the last 5-6 miles. and it works, you know, but like there's other people just like blast out and they end up walking for a while and then they blast out some more and then they walk, you know, it's like it turns into this crazy thing, you know, and like I'm a perfect example of like, I do like that condition thing because the one thing I've kind of proved is that except for one race, like out of my 7 Ironman races, 6 of them I've run the exact same time, depending on it, like conditions really didn't matter, hills or whatever didn't matter. I just sort of pull that pace out, which I'm not proud of, but like I think on some ways it gives me an advantage to stay sort of where I always stay, which is like, you know, whatever, top 20 in my age group or something, or 15 to 25. But I still haven't mastered that idea of like getting, you know, really putting the elements in my head and like thinking about them smartly and believing that if you can approach the race early through the bike, through the early run in a very smart way, that it will pay off. And it's just this impatience factor that we all have. And who doesn't put a number in their head? I mean, it's got to be very rare.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's pretty rare, but I think a lot of it also comes down to the athlete's overall confidence in their body of work. You know, especially if you started out with your training block or you sign up for a race and you think, all right, I think I can go sub this here, or I think I can PR here. You know, you have that thought and then you don't have the greatest, or you have an inconsistent, or you have some injuries or illness or, you know, family things or life or anything that gets in the way of training. It always does. Then you're kind of thinking, I've got to have the perfect race today because I'm not totally confident and content with the amount of effort and the amount of work that I put in the last 2, 3, 5, 6 months. So now you're like,
you pull a rabbit out of your hat.
Exactly. And you're like, maybe I've had the perfect day and get this. But then as the day gets closer and you see how things might unfold, you're like, it's not gonna happen. Like, you know, you're like, so you have
kind
that
of fun though to do that.
But then you have the athletes who are super content and confident and comfortable. You know, they kind of have that quiet confidence of like, I think I've done all the work that I'm supposed to do. You know, it hasn't been perfect, but for the most part, like I'm in a really good spot. Like I feel really good about this. Now it's just about how I manage myself against the day. And I think those are two very distinct differences in terms of like how you can go into a race looking like with this expectation time hanging over your head, when Mother Nature can be like, it's just basically like swatting people, you know, with the baseball bat, like, nope, not happening. Of course, some people will just because they're gonna have that great of a day. But I think the ones that are gonna probably race the best and keep their wits about them are the ones that have just done the majority of the work and that have been consistent in their training and done that they want. They're not having to chase that, you know, that rabbit. They're not having to chase things. They're not going to make rash decisions to go after a time that's probably not going to happen. And then they just kind of, then the mistakes mount, right? It's going to be about who makes the least amount of mistakes. And people who make mistakes are people who are impulsive, people who are usually chasing after an expectation or a time. Like they're the ones that make bad decisions. And on races that can be challenging, whether it's a race like St. George, which could be insanely windy and insanely hot. And a lot of athletes, the people are going to make giant mistakes. Or you look at, you know, races like Eagleman or Gulf Coast or Texas, where it could be super windy and also super hot out of nowhere. People are going to make, you know, bad decisions on over biking into the wind or you know, like, or not have anything left for the last 10 miles because they blew it trying to chase their best miles per hour ever on the bike, only to find out they're going to run a minute and a half slower on the run. Like, you know, it's about not making mistakes, and it's about keeping your head and your wits about you, which is so incredibly hard, not just in the middle of competition, in the middle of going for your goals and meeting expectations, but just being around, you know, 2,500 other people that are doing the same thing. You just you see it. I would argue 90 to 95% of everyone's fastest mile in the Ironman marathon is the first mile. They come flying out of T1. Like they don't even feel their legs. They don't even know what's going on. They are just like juiced up by the crowd. And they are obviously so excited to be off that saddle, but they are just come out flying. And then after like mile 4, they've like slowed down by like 30, 35, 40, 45 seconds, you know, like, right. And you just have to be able to make really, really, really good decisions. And again, that when you have races that are going to be challenging, that come more about you against the day and you against the elements. And it comes down to, you know, decision making and, you know, and keeping your wits about you and not getting discouraged. Like those can level the playing field against people who are just going on, I have to have the perfect day. And not only do I have to have the perfect day, if I don't have this, then today is going to be a failure. I will have not met my expectations. I'm going to be devastated. And having that realization is, I think, just a very important thing in terms of your success, because it's going to be a freaking hard day. And that's where you also have to kind of have that mindset shift of, I'm going to embrace it and I'm going to execute to the best of my ability. And I'm going to have the best hard day that I possibly can. And I'm going to let everybody else have a really shitty day because they're going to make all the mistakes that I'm not going to make today.
Yeah. I mean, I've talked about it before, but I think one of the things that I've learned to do over time is this sort of readjust within the race kind of thing, because you can I think we all have a little bit of tendency of, I want to shock the world today. You know, I didn't even hardly train. My longest run was blank. My longest ride was only blank, or I didn't do this and whatever. And then you want to say, I came out and look at my, I nailed my goal time out of the blue. It was like, but that rarely happens. But I was, you think about, a lot of times I have this, loose goal for 11 hours in a full. And at some point during the race, I realized that that's not going to happen, and then instead of readjusting and shooting for 11:30, I kind of be like, I need to do 11:10 or something, like that. And then it blows up and then it becomes 12. Whereas if you kind of readjust your game plan within the game plan, and, like, I just think if that 11 turns into 11:40, and I think sometimes that can be manageable, but I screw it up, because I push too hard on the bike or whatever. But that 11:40 might push me up. And I know we talk about overall performance here in the race field, but, age group, that might, 20 minutes might be the difference of, 10 slots. But
for sure.
But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I give it up and I push too hard and I keep making those mistakes, and it turns into a 12-hour race versus 11:40. But then you're like, well, it's like 15, 20 minutes. It doesn't even seem like that magnificent of a, you know what I mean? It's like, it's not that majestic to really nail something like that.
It goes back to, I think,
like,
the best way to approach your training as well is, like, I think when you go into races like this, that could be challenging, because we all have like you said it, like in your story, right? We all have these times in our heads. Like we're going through training, we're visualizing, what do we think I can do today? Like everyone has that, especially if you've been racing for a long period of time. Like you just kind of know what level of fitness you have and what because you've been there before, like what you can probably do. So you have that time. But so all you might be thinking of is like, how fast can I go today? Like how fast? And that's gonna come down to having your best day with the best conditions. Everything's gonna have to go right. Nutrition's gonna have to be perfect. Everything has to be great. But when you find yourself going up against, a day that could be difficult, it no longer to me becomes, I wonder how fast I can go today. It should become, I wonder how smart I can be today. And that's how training should be as well. It should be about how smart can I be? Because if you look at it in the lead up to your race, it's not about how fast you can go every single day. Because if that's your only goal is to go as fast as you can every single day, then you're probably going to have not a very good race day, because you're going to burn all your biscuits and shot all your bullets, and burnt your biscuits way, way, way before. And it's just about how smart can I be today? And that also includes, taking a day off, like here and there, like that's an empowering thing that, like, I really love about the way that we approach things with our athletes is like, I want you to be like Erickson, who's, an athlete we talked about before on this podcast, but Friday he was like, I really didn't want to, it was a recovery week too. And he's like, wasn't really feeling today. I had to run and swim. And I even like packed my bag and went to the pool and I got to the locker room. He was like, I just didn't really feel it today. So I packed my bag and went home. I was like, dude, good for you, because that you like listen, knowing that's called being smart, right? And then he nailed like the next 2 days of his workouts, like, and he nailed like the 30 before that. And some athletes will joke and they'll do like hashtag December rules, because they'll like skip a workout or do something or take a walk instead, because in December that's kind of what we do with our people. And like that's smart, like that, like we want you, and you should for yourself, your self coach, like you should want to consider yourself a very, very, very smart athlete, because in my opinion, the smartest athletes in training are the ones that end up with the fastest times, because they usually end up being the ones that are available to train. They're consistent. They don't get caught up in the numbers. They have more fun with it, and they generally just make overall better decisions. So if you go into a race with like, I wonder how fast I'm going, you now shift it to like, I wonder how smart I can be today. That's when you end up usually having your best day, like overall. Like if I can look back at like, tons of examples over the course of how the different sports I've played in my life, and like the times that I've gone out and tried to like over athletics, show I'm more athletic, I can do this. I haven't lived up to my potential. I've had like really bad or underperformed days, but the ones where I thought about, I'm going to be just as smart as I can be today. You might still beat me, right? You might still, but I'm going to be as smart as I can. Usually what happens is you end up either making it a much better fight. And like, that's how I was in tennis. Like I was never the greatest tennis player ever. But my thing was, I'm going to be smarter than you. I'm going to be more patient than you. I'm going to get all my serves in. I'm going to get every ball back, and I'm going to let you make all the mistakes. And that usually ended up being suiting me very, very well. Same thing for racing. It's like when I go out in training, when I go out and try to be really, really, really fast, I almost always, because as soon as you say, I'm going fast today, number comes in your head. That's going to be 730s a day. And then when you don't see 730s, then you try to force it, and you blow up and have a really bad day. But if your thing is like you head up for a long run and you think, I'm just going to be smart today, and I'm going to hold back, and I'm going to say, like, this is like a phrase I use, and I was texting this with one of our athletes, Jerry Kaler, who had a ridiculously awesome half marathon PRS last weekend. She was like, I kept saying to myself, not yet, not yet, not yet, in terms of like pulling that final trigger. And that's the thing that I say to myself, like in on the bike or on like negative split runs. I'm like, just hold on a minute, hold on, slow down. It's never like speed up and force it. Like it's always like, wait, just wait a little bit, just wait a little bit. Because as you're waiting and as you're being smart, you're being tactical, and you're being, efficient with what your body has and what the day has given you, you're giving yourself the best chance to succeed in a smaller window versus having to succeed in a very large window all at the same time. Your competition, and I'm not saying all competitors are stupid and they make bad decisions, but most of them will. Most of them are going to make really bad decisions in the heat of the moment and based on their expectations. You're just kind of letting people make all these really, really bad decisions and do stupid things. And you see the same thing in all sports. The people who have like a great game plan in, professional football or basketball or hockey or baseball, it's like, you just try to play really smart, and then you can always, that's because we're human, we're gonna do things that are stupid. We're gonna make mistakes, and you just kind of see people like fall by the wayside, while you're just kind of being, annoyingly consistent and steady Eddie.
Mm-hmm. I think back to when I first started this sport, and when there was more mass starts and there was more wave starts and things like that, where as a non-swimmer, there used to be this thing. A lot of people would teach, and a lot of people would think about, hey, well, when you get in the water, you go hard for the first 100 or 200 to get out in front of the pack or get some clear water. I'm not saying it, but that was kind of a thing. And I think mentally that has always kind of messed with my head, because even if I did get out there and find clear water, I would get over swam. It's like, so it made no sense. But we have this, like you said, if you're out running and before you go and you say you're going to go fast today, that automatically kind of like puts your brain in a different place too. And I think probably subconsciously gives you some anxiety or what have you be. And that's why I talk to people, especially now with the rolling starts and things of that nature. I really harp on people just to, start as slow as they can, because when you start in the water, you're usually starting probably 20% harder than you think you are, or something like that. And it kind of winds things up. And I think for me, it just sets a bad tone for the whole day sometimes. And I think you can kind of get in that same place on the bike. And you already mentioned on the run, it's like at the beginning of these events, you kind of like subconsciously are throwing down more than you think, So I think that playing smart, I think that's a big part of it, is really learning to control that initial effort when you're, excited to be off the bike, and instead of going out there and letting it go, because you're going to be going faster than normal. So yeah, I think, man, going into these races, you just have to have that mentality about that. Not yet, not yet, not yet. I think you need to start that like from the minute you get in the water, because it's a long day. I mean, if you think mentally you're getting into that water and you're like, man, I'm in an Ironman. This is a race right now. It's not a race right then. It's just a warm up, man.
Like that's the thing, is like when you come and say, I'm going fast today, like I think you immediately tense up because you begin to forcing, because you're having to force yourself into fast. And on the flip side, it's like, I'm going to kind of let the race happen around me, and I'm going to kind of see how things go, because you don't know, especially if you haven't participated in an event where it might be super hot. It's like, you don't really know how things are going to play out. You don't know how your body's going to respond. So it's best to kind of like sit, wait, and make calculated decisions versus forcing yourself, because the more you force yourself, especially by shooting for a power target or a pace or overall time, if you're that laser focused, you tend to be so unaware of what's going on around you, that your body is overheating, and that you're done sweating, that you're not taking in as much fluid, you're not taking in more fluid than you should ever take in on a race because it is so hot. That stuff is gone. And by the time you feel it, it's kind of like, that's why they say, eat slow, like take your time, because if you eat super fast, and by the time like your stomach and your brain actually have the time to connect, you're way past full, baby. Like you have like eaten way too much and gorged. But if you take your time and do it, do it the way you're supposed to do it, then obviously like you feel full with less food. And so that same thing can be said for racing, is like, let the race happen around you and be smart and look at things and make good decisions and just be really, really aware of how things are going, and be aware of your body and be aware that things are going to change over the course of the day. And look at yourself, and I think just reassure yourself, I'm good at adapting. I'm good at being flexible, right? Where triathletes can be so incredibly rigid with their training, with their inability to have the hindsight and the confidence to take days off or to take things easy. Like they're just incredibly rigid, type A, high expectation, high drive. Like I can't miss this pace. I got to hit this target. When that comes to race day, unless it's your perfect day with perfect scenario and perfect weather and everything's perfect, that's going to come back to bite you, because all you're doing is chasing your ego. All you're doing is chasing these expectations. And so I think telling yourself, and that's like a thing that we really preach with our athletes, is, and by going on feel, right, going on effort, and going, and being able to be consistent and do things. It's like you have to be able to, and also empowering your athletes to make their own decisions on race day, and to give them that, like, I can be flexible. I can be, I can adjust. I can, things can happen, and I'll do my best. And that's when the people are going to fail like that. I think that's the athletes that have that kind of feeling are going to be the ones that are going to be the most successful. Like going back to, I think you even referenced this in last week's podcast, like Des Linden, when she won Boston, it was in the most crappy conditions possible. That's like something that I think she trains in Michigan. That's like her go-to. Like she just used to training in the crappiest of the crap. So she ran off what she knew she could do, while all the other people who were probably statistically better overall, more fit, more apt to perform well on a perfect day marathon, they were chasing what their perfect day marathon was going to be. And they just fell by the wayside and fell by the wayside and fell by the wayside, or dropped out of the race. And then there she was, left to win the day, while it might say, oh, well, she only won the day because, this isn't like, well, a win is a win, baby. And if that's what you can do on race day compared to the rest of your competitions, that's the kind of mentality you have to have, is I'm mentally tough, I'm physically tough, I'm emotionally resistant or resilient. And so I can handle what the day is going to give me, and I'll make the best decisions that I can. And I will use the best fitness that I have to make the best of what I have, what I'll be given today on whatever the race day is.
Mm. Yeah, sometimes that can help you get in that place. I mean, it forces you to be like, okay, I need to chill here a little bit because this is not ideal. And then you start like, I mean, if I get on just a trainer and I don't look at any numbers and I just put it in a gear and I ride for like an hour and a half, by the end, I'm going to be probably higher power than I was at the beginning. If I just like take a casual spin, and I think that's one of those things, at least I try to think about, is, when people have a power number coming out of the swim, and they've got a power number of, let's say 180 for a race or whatever. And if they try to get to 180 like right away, I think that's a bad move, and I think a lot of people do that. I think that's the way to think about it, right? It's like if you have a pace in mind for your run, you don't want to be at that thing right away. You want to kind of let your body open up into it. And for me, that just makes sense naturally. I think your body needs a little time, and to have the patience, right, to look at your numbers and be like, man, those aren't as high as I want them, but I still have 100 miles to get there, I just think that that's such an underrated piece sometimes, is that, by the end of that your ride, you could feel stronger if you played it smart up front and paced it right and just kind of went to your feel. And we're like, man, I'm starting to feel good now. I'm 3 hours in, rather than trying to hold on now. You're just starting to warm up and feel good. What a feeling that is when that sort of thing happens later in your race, instead of being like 20 miles from the finish line going, oh my God, I got to hold this. And then you just, you're giving way too much energy and you're trying to hold on to a number and because it's your number,
Can't deviate.
No, but like if you warmed into that, and then you could be surprised maybe towards the end going, man, I have to slow down to stay on my number. I mean, that would be a great predicament, right?
Yeah. It's an ideal one. And that's like that's why also, again, like, that's why racing is so hard, because it's like so many decisions, and you can have this fitness built up, and you can have this overall view of what you can do on race day. But, a lot of it is like when the conditions are going to be so unpredictable, like you have to take that into account when you plan the race, when you're getting your own personal strategy. It's like, you have to take all those into account. Like, and again, you have to be able to, think through things in a way that's like, even if my plan A isn't working, then my plan B now becomes my plan A. And because if it's the only executable strategy that I have for today, then it becomes my best chance to be successful. It might not look the way they want to. And again, it's how you measure success. It's like, and a lot of athletes struggle. Again, I'll go back to St. George just because it's present, but a lot of athletes struggle at St. George because of the nature of the race. It's been super cold. It's going to be super hot. It's like rarely the perfect day. It could be super windy. A lot in the water could be in the 50s. Like it makes for a very, very challenging day, which is also why a lot of people gravitate towards it, because they like challenging. It's not like, oh, I want the easiest possible race venue ever. But it's also about how do you measure what success looks like for you on the day. And that should always go back to, did I execute to the best of my ability, and did I put all of my effort out there? And if you can answer that question, yes and yes. Yes, I executed my plan to the best of my ability. Yes, I put forth the best and the most amount of effort that I could possibly put out. Then the day is a win, and your success is going to be a massive success. That should, time irrelevant, just disregard miles per hour or time or, overall. Cause like, again, going back to like, are you trying to be smart or are you trying to be fast? Because smart usually is fast. Smart usually gets you, and it might not get you to where you want to be at, mile 2, of the bike. You might not be leading the race, or you might not be doing this, but if it means you're winning at the end, then I think that's probably the end goal, right? It's to be there at the end. It's not about where you are the first 10 miles of the race. It's where you are the last 10, or, the last 3 or the last 5, because that's when races are won. It's not, it's not like mile 1 from a speed standpoint. Races are won the beginning of the race because of how smart you are, right? And that's why I like when people who obsess about how fast they can go and how fast they can do this and track workouts here and this, and VO2 max every single day for anything to do. I'm like, yeah, well, if you can't hold that for 5.5 hours, 6 hours on a bike, then it's meaningless. If you don't have the run durability to hold your pace, it's not about how fast you go. It's about how little you slow down. And your speed is irrelevant unless you can hold that speed the last mile of your race. So that's like, it's about being smart, so that when it's time for you to go fast, you can go fast while everybody else has tried to go fast, and now they are incapable of going fast because they haven't been smart. And that's when you start passing. It's a lot, pass a lot of people, not because you're that much fitter, but because you've been that much smarter.
I just think that's hard to remember in the moment. And I think
I totally agree.
Keep going. But you're absolutely right. I couldn't agree more.
Couldn't agree more, man. It is. It's hard. It's hard. It is very, very hard, because as soon as you step in the water, it's competition time, right? And you see people passing you, it's like human nature. Like, well, you're not supposed to be passing me. Like, you see, especially with dudes, like they're in like these big packs, and you see somebody pass them, like, oh, I'm going to surge. And it's like, it's all about, what's best for me in this moment, not what's best for me at the end of the day. And again, that's why we always go back to like seeing people who, it's very easy. You want to know why you'll never hear anybody, that has a great day to talking about their bike split is because they're running so fast and they can't breathe. Okay. The only time you ever hear in a race course people talk about how great their bike split was is because they're walking. It's because they're aerobic, and you don't want to be that person. Don't be the person be the person who talks about how smart your bike was and that you were able to run so hard and so fast because that's how smart you played on your bike. And that's how days are won in the bike. That's how days are lost. That's all I got today, man.
That's all I got.
Powercast, baby. 50 minutes in. As always, we love you. If you're going to be in St. George, have a blast. It's going to be, I can't wait to track and watch everybody and watch the pros. I think it's going to be a really interesting day unfolding. I know there's another 70.3 in Australia. And then obviously tons of races going on, half marathons, Olympics, races all over. It's kind of like the Swiss Army days right now where it's like you got 5Ks, 10Ks, duathlons, half marathons, trail races, back-to-back Olympic races, aqua bikes, swim races, like 70.3s, about to have fulls. Like they're going on all day long, every day. If it's been a while, hop over to our website, C26Triathlon.com. It's our one-stop shop for all things coaching, camps, and community. We also have our ongoing club program, which is continuing to go strong. Mike's in charge of that. Click on it, learn more about there. We have 5 coaches in there as well. Click on them, learn more about Mike and Jessica and Phil and Nicole. Awesome people doing awesome things. Athletes are just really turning out we're just very fortunate to work with a really we work with some really awesome and athletic people. We work with some just generally all around awesome people that do awesome things, and it's just fun to be around and fun to be a part of. We also just put on our closed Facebook group this morning, which again is Crushing Iron Group. We have our Ironman Chattanooga Training Camp that's going on at the end.
Come on in.
Yeah, come on in July. We're capping that at 30. We've already had, I think, 6 people sign up this morning. So look on the Crushing Iron Facebook page. I think there's also info on our website about it as well. And then if you have any questions at all about the weekend itself, email c26operations@gmail.com. And then we also have, I think Mike posted in our website as well, you can look into staying in our, we have a hub condo package going on right now that's also available to see under the hub tab on the website. And again, if you have any questions about, or just coming into town, an athlete come in town this morning, can hang out for a little bit, and city of Chattanooga is booming. People are coming, people are hanging out, people are loving what the city has. So if you want more info about the condo in general, if you're coming in town for your own training weekend for Chattanooga, you can email more info on that for c26operations@gmail.com. If you have anything for Mike,
CrushingIron@gmail.com.
If you have anything for me, C26Coach.
All right, buddy. I appreciate it.
Always.
Play it smart.